What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Tequila Tuesday. I am here with my good friend and new strategic account executive at Alice, as well as co-founder of the Women in Sales Club, as well as head of community at Thursday Night Sales, Alexine Muduwar, and hopefully her co-founder and partner, Gabrielle Blackwell, is able to join us as well. Alexine, thanks for showing up and spending some time with us. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me, and good to see everybody. So many friends in this room tonight, the virtual room.
Appreciate you making the time. I know you're in the middle of onboarding and trying to learn as much as you can. I know it's tough, so we all appreciate you. So we're going to spend some time tonight talking about women in sales, as well as community building and the steps and strategies that Alexine has taken along the way as a part of and leader of two different communities. So we're going to kind of turn it over to her and Gabrielle if she's able to show up. And as always, questions drive these conversations. So dump your questions into the chat, message me directly, and I'll be over here taking notes and trying to get a queue going and bring everybody off mute as best I can. And yeah, I'll kind of get out of the way and let Alexine take over for a little bit here.
Yeah, well, until GB gets here, maybe you can kind of
I'll stay close.
Stay close. Stay with me,
close.
Just in case. But yeah, so excited to be here. I feel like I was just scrolling. I feel like I know almost everyone, so I feel like I'm in a safe space. But if I don't know you somehow, my name is Alexine Muduwar. As Scott said, I'm a strategic account executive at a company called Alice. I just started 6 days ago. I'm 37 pages of notes in. I'm doing my mock calls. I took my first sales call today. So I'm in the thick of it. It's officially ramp time and I'm excited. But prior to this, I've spent about 8 years in high growth startups. So I don't know if there's something wrong with me, but I seek out companies that are in startup mode. It's very fascinating to me. I like being part of the growth engine. I like being there when it's a little bit tumultuous and stuff's happening. And as soon as it evens out and things are normal and easy, I leave. So that's me. That's my background. And yeah, so I co-founded the Women in Sales Club alongside Gabrielle Blackwell, who hopefully will be here in a couple of minutes, but I thought maybe a good starting point would just be sort of the founding story, how we got our start, why we started the Women in Sales Club. I think Gabrielle probably has her own variation on this, but initially we started the Women in Sales Club really with a premise of just wanting to have some conversations in a space with some people that we were friends with. So it was at the beginning of this year, it was around the time that Clubhouse had launched, and it was kind of that point where it was really hot. Everybody was downloading Clubhouse. You couldn't quite get in because you needed like those secret event invites and all this stuff. But we wanted to have some conversations. And so we scheduled a session, or I had scheduled a session, and I wanted to have, a couple of my friends show up, talk to them. And I was having technical difficulties, which Kelsey can appreciate. And so I kept messaging Gabrielle behind the scenes. I'm like, how do I do this? Why do everybody's microphones keep flickering? What does this mean? Like, how do I add people to the room? So it was like all these things. And then after that, it just made sense for us to kind of do this together. So we originally started out, I think we had something like 15 to 20 people come to the first session. So we're like, do we want to do this weekly? We're probably going to run out of topics, but here we are almost 10 months later, and we have only missed one session. So it's been like a pretty crazy ride. But it's been a really incredible experience.
So how did you decide specifically, like what day, what time, for how long, like super kind of boring tactical questions?
Good question. Yeah. And this is something like we're still kind of figuring out too. So originally we were like, okay, we're both super busy. I'm involved in Thursday night sales. So obviously it's not going to be on Thursdays. We're super busy during the week. We didn't want to use inside of work hours because we're already doing our prospecting. We're on the phones. We're doing all this stuff. So we thought, what is our other option? And we landed on a Saturday afternoon because for me, I tend to either just be like lurking around the house, doing chores, kind of like hanging out, not doing much of anything, or doing like creative activities. So I figured Saturday afternoon would be an optimal time, and it's worked out. But it has had its challenges because there's some people who are available. There's some people who it's just not a good time. Some people have kids. So we're starting to move towards thinking about what the next generation, what our format's going to be on a monthly basis. So I think the future for us is maybe like keeping 2 clubhouse sessions a month and then adding in some different event formats. Like we'd love to do like maybe 1 live Zoom event per month and then get into some written content too. So that's kind of future state, but current state, we're just on the old clubhouse, which has been interesting. It's a polarizing place. You know this, Scott.
Yeah, for sure. Did you find it encouraging or discouraging that there's kind of other women in sales groups and so many different kind of micro communities? Like, did that make you kind of hold off or be more cautious to start something up? Or were you like, hey, that's total market validation, there's room for us, we should do this?
Market validation, and also it's like an additive model. Like it's kind of like Thursday night sales. It's like any of these communities, like we're not like the first group of people that's ever going to come together in the history of mankind, but each of them has their own flavor. So for us, like we're entering into a space where, yes, you have other women in sales groups. One of the key differentiators, I think, for us that we weren't necessarily seeing at some of the other groups was that there weren't really that many men joining the conversations. And this is, based on experience over several years of attending these events. So we weren't seeing any men showing up. And we're looking around internally, and you look at our leadership teams, we look at the folks that are hiring us for our roles, most of them happen to be men. So it felt like there's this miss here where the people that we'd really love to also be part of the conversation aren't necessarily showing up. So how can we create an environment that is conducive where men feel comfortable also being part of the conversation? And also knowing that for us, a lot of our mentors had been men throughout of our careers. So it makes sense for us to include them. So I think that's an interesting flavor that we brought to the table. And since then, we have like Jeff Bajorek, Larry Long Jr., John Stern comes to some of our events. So like you have some of these folks who we're seeing time and time again continue to show up. And then I think there is just something really unique, like Gabrielle's style is completely different than mine. I'm very like type A, like energy level up here, a little bit like, all over the place. She's over here, like much more mellow. So I think like because of who leads each of these communities, similar to you and Amy, Scott, you get a different flavor of like the conversations. And I think kind of the third piece too, outside of like our leadership and the fact that we're including men, is just that I think we're having a conversation. We're not like teaching people. We've made that very clear in every single one of these sessions. Like this is not a conversation where you're going to leave here necessarily with a tip of like Alexine's 10 tactical tips to do X, Y, and Z. I might share a couple of my tips, but I'm also there because I want to hear Kelsey's ideas. I want to hear Scott's ideas. I want to hear what JJ has to say. And then I'm taking all of that information and we're sharing it amongst each other. So it's much more of like I think of it as just like a table and we're all sitting at the table together. I don't think of it as like a hierarchical thing where I'm talking at people or down to two people. So I think that allows for kind of a different flavor as well.
We'll pause here. Carolyn Dustin has a question. Carolyn, I'm going to take you off mute.
Thanks, Scott. Hey, Alexine.
Hi.
Hey, I've only been able to join a couple of sessions, unfortunately. The schedule is really tough, but I love the conversations I've heard. My question for you is really, where do you get your topics from? And secondary to that is, what's been kind of the most vibrant discussion topic that you've had throughout the course of these 10 months?
That is a good two-parter. I'm going to answer one with a visual cue. So this is my list of topics that I pull from. Usually when GB and I'm keeping this list and it's shared with her, but it is something like, if you can visualize, that's like, I think 10 scrolls long. So we have a lot of topics to choose from. The majority come from the people who are actually attending the session. So at the end of every session, we save about 5 minutes and then we ask about what are some topics that are top of mind. I'm also paying close attention and logging any ideas from LinkedIn too. So a lot of times, this happened last week, someone tagged Women in Sales Club in like three or four different comments about motherhood and sales. And so, you know, Gabrielle, myself, we don't have children, but we have a really strong network of women in our communities that do have children that could be part of that conversation. So now we're in the process of planning an event around that, which will be really cool. So I think a lot of it comes from crowdsourced ideas, and we're just kind of aggregating them. And then honestly, like each week, we're just kind of like reprioritizing the list that we have and seeing what makes sense, or seeing what people are chit-chatting about on LinkedIn. Like if we see a real big uptick in topics around employee resource groups, for instance, then we'll reprioritize that topic. So honestly, it's just a massive list that seems to be never ending. And we're very thankful for that. And then topics, I guess it depends on what you like the definition. I guess ones that had a lot of passion behind them, perhaps, or like one that was that really stuck with me. We did a session on being LGBTQIA+ in sales, and I 100% cried twice on that, like on Clubhouse, which was like, nobody can tell, but it's like everybody's voices were kind of whimpery, so you could tell. But it was a really tough session to hear some of the stories, to hear the experiences that folks in this industry that I love so much have had. And so it was hard for me to listen to some of it, but it was really powerful and moving as well. So I think for me, as I think about like sessions that really resonated or like were intense, like that was a big one. We also did a session on ageism in sales that was like pretty intense too. But like these are topics that you don't hear about. Like it's still so taboo to talk about age in sales, to talk about like being a mother in sales. Like they're just these topics that for so long we haven't been, you know, able to talk about openly. So I think that they're really important, and I'm glad that we're having the conversations, even when they are difficult or very emotional to hear.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alexine, what are some of the things that that you've learned in this process, not just specifically from the topics that you've been covering, but like from a company building perspective, from a community building perspective? Like how do you approach these things, and how would you advise other people who maybe have ideas or are in the process of trying to grow their own communities or are tasked with that through their company to grow the community?
Yeah, I think there's been so many like lessons learned and stuff, you know, and you always want to like take it with a grain of salt. Like you only know what you know when you start. It's similar to Thursday night sales. Like we're learning a lot through that experience too. I guess like the one thing that I wish we would have done a little sooner, but I'm glad we did, was like really delegate out, like, these are the duties, or these are the areas that I'm going to oversee. This is what I care about. These are the things I like. That was another piece that worked out really well because of the personality types. Like GB is very like ideas and content, written content, like stuff like that. I'm very much like social, people connector, want to like do more of the partnership side. So like that kind of worked really well. But I think like having that conversation early on, I think also kind of always having, I mean, I guess being in sales, we always talk about having a roadmap, but I never thought about having like a personal roadmap for this journey. And now I'm kind of creating that. Like, what do
you define as like your personal roadmap? Like where are you starting from? Where are you now? Where are you trying to get to?
Yeah, good question. So when I think of a roadmap, I think like, this is what I want the next. I mean, right now I'm thinking honestly in like quarters, not even like a year. So I'm like, this is what I want by end of Q4 to look like. This is what I want by like end of Q1 next year to look like. And that entails like, these are what kind of sponsorships I want to have in place, or partnerships, whatever you want to call them. This is the type of content. This is the new content calendar I want us to have. So like reworking, you know, what we have today, instead of doing like these 4, oh, so cute. Instead of doing these like 4 weekly sessions, maybe it's 2, some content, and then a live Zoom, but really creating that calendar months in advance. And then also thinking about what are like the bigger scale events. Oh, I see GB now. But then it's going to be like, what am I going to do for like some of those bigger scale events? Like, do we want to work with a certain organization and plan that out? And then you have to build another quarter into that, or maybe 2 quarters to plan for that. So for us, I think we just have to get ahead of this by like a quarter at least each time. So when I think of the roadmap, it's like, what do we want to be 6 months from today? What do we want to have accomplished? What is feasible given our workload? And then we have to execute, which is the hard part. Hi, GB.
Hey, I'm sorry for being late. I apologize.
You made it. Let's
Yes.
let's fire a question your way. What do you think has been the hardest part of starting the community so far? Is it just the promotion and getting people in? Is it continuing to keep people engaged? What's the hardest part for you right now?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of like getting stuff out there, I feel like, well, number one, Alexine is amazing to work with because she's like, we need to get this done. We need to do this now, full on Virgo energy. And I'm like, I'm so glad that you are the person that you are. I feel like the most challenging thing hasn't really been about Women in Sales Club, but it's more so balance, quote unquote, balancing between the needs of the club, the community, as well as, all right, I'm in a full-time job and it's also like a high stakes organization where very, very demanding. And so how to like have this side hustle, but also very much manage the expectations and manage up with the leaders that I work with at Gong to make sure that I can still prioritize this, prioritize Gong, and that there's not any competing priorities in that way. So that to me has probably been like the most challenging.
That totally makes sense. So like what has worked for you and how to like budget and allocate your time and your energy?
Yeah, Alexine and I, it seems like every conversation that we're having, if someone's like, oh, hey, we would love to do an event, we would love to do X, Y, and Z, we're like, outside of working hours. So we're available before 9 a.m. Central Time. We're available after 5:30 p.m. Central Time. And so if that works, cool. It's also recognizing with our own schedules that we might not be able to do as many things as we'd like to do in, let's say, the next 3 to 4 week time span. So like we were chit-chatting last night and it's like, okay, we could do this podcast with so-and-so and we're looking to December, right? So there's been times where we've had to, it's much more about like managing our time and just setting really clear expectations with the folks that we might be engaging with. Of course, we have like our Saturday session, so that shouldn't conflict with work at all. And I feel like I might have jumped in, Alexine, as you were sharing some things about, all right, well, what is the next kind of evolution of our event schedule and our engagement look like, where it's maybe not every Saturday on Clubhouse, but it's something else that we can have a higher impact, we can have more engagement, and we can also like take care of ourselves personally, given the fact that we're doing 2 things at once.
Yes. I think there's also something to be said about if you are going to like enter into one of these like ventures, like taking a very close examination of like who you're partnering with. Like Scott, I think of you and Amy, and you have such different personalities, but it works. Like it works so well and it just makes sense. And I feel like Gabrielle and I have like a similar like yin and yang kind of like thing going on where it just works and it clicks. But I think like had I gone about this group, or had Gabrielle gone about this group with someone the exact same personality as us, with like the exact same areas of strengths, I think that would have been a very interesting experience. I could have seen that being like more of a clash. But Gabrielle and I actually did this exercise solo, but ended up like comparing results. It's called the is it the Clifton Gallup strengths assessment? So we went through and did this strengths assessment, and it's basically like aggregates all this information and then tells you, here are like your key strengths, here are your key motivators. And then we're looking at it, it was the flip opposite. Like if you would have flipped one of our charts upside down, it would have been the exact opposite. So it was like very fascinating to look at the 2 against each other. And like my motivators were like, woo, and like all this stuff. And Gabrielle was like, this makes perfect sense. Like this entire thing reads exactly like what I thought it would. And so I think like paying close attention to who you're going to be partnering with and looking at those strengths and doing like a cheesy exercise.
Did you 2 think of that and go through those exercises before you decided to jump into this? Or is that just something you're like already in the deep end? You're like, wow, we should figure out how we work together, and are we similar or not?
Yeah, we were definitely in it. Like we were in the, we call it the relationship. We were in the relationship. We had, but I think we were still at an inflection point where we were trying to delegate duties. So it was a good time for us to do it, because I felt like that was the point where we were like, who is going to focus on what? And so that gave us some clarity. So I think that was actually well timed when it happened.
Yeah, I think I might have taken the club hostage for a second, where I was like, I think there's one part of the partnership here is this is something I shared with Alexine, which is we had like cross paths so many times. So we, I knew about her profile, I knew about some of the things that she had been doing, and then I think we were on like 4 webinars together. Like we were both panelists. So already I feel like I got to know Alexine prior to us starting Women in Sales Club, or even prior to us even having a one-on-one conversation, where I was like, she's got a really interesting way of looking at things. She's top notch. She seems to care about the things that I really care about and value. Our perspectives are different, and I still respect it so much. So there was a lot of that, and I think a huge part of what brought us together again was us having conversations about things. So it does seem like it was like everything seemed very organic in that way, and very symbiotic in that way, and harmonious. But there did come like there have been situations where, let's say, like, even if Alexine was the type of, like, in certain situations, Alexine was the one who would normally run point on something, but I'm aware of what's going on in her world where she can't get to it. And I'm like, okay, well, my plate is pretty empty. I can take that on. So there is that like kind of back and forth. One, we're communicating a lot. So that's something that we are totally open with. We don't have the same perspectives on everything. So we want to hear more from each other too, but we're also very much aware of what's going on in each other's lives in a healthy way, where one of us can step in when one of us is going through something. And I think there was also a conversation that Alexine and I feel like we hold each other accountable in the sense of there's things that we want to do. There's maybe there's an aspiration that we have for Women in Sales Club, but we also recognize we have to be in a good spot. So there was like that one kind of, we've had tough conversations with each other of like, all right, hey, it seems like there's something else that's showing up and starting to impact Women in Sales Club. So like we have to do something about that. And so that's really what led us to let's look at strengths, like let's talk to the people that we need to talk to, and let's come back together and see if we can approach this in a better way, or in just a way that might be more meaningful and easier to do.
Yeah. All right, Carla, you're up. Carla's got a question for you too.
Hey guys, one of the questions I just asked, how can we show up? People that are showing up a lot to contribute, to lighten the load. I know we've thrown out ideas and topics, but what else?
Oh my gosh. I will say this, like, however cheesy it is, I screenshot every single person that tags Women in Sales or myself and Gabrielle in a post. I screenshot every single one of them. I keep them in an affirmations folder. I don't care if that makes me a loser, but I keep all of them because there are days where you have to deal with some shit and it's like, oh my God, what am I doing this for? Like, what have I lost my mind? Or is this what I really want to be doing? And those are the days, like, I go back through those messages and it could be like the simplest thing. Like I saw, like Vicky's posted them before. I've screenshotted every single one of those that Vicky did. And it just means the world just to see someone like say something. And it doesn't even, it's not for the sake of like, hey, spread the word. I mean, we definitely appreciate that too. It's just those little moments, even when they're not public, like sometimes people will message us behind the scenes, or they'll be like, hey, that session like really hit me like harder than what I thought. It was incredible for these reasons. Like those are like my battery feels like it refills and I feel like I take a breath of air every time. So little things like that honestly are really powerful for me personally, but I'm motivated by woo. So it makes sense.
You keep saying woo. What? I don't even know what this means.
Winning others over. I learned it from my strengths assessment. So I feel like are you on the woo train, Scott?
I don't even know what that is at all. No.
Like it's like you win, like winning people over, like getting their admiration, like appreciation. I don't know.
I don't think Scott's a wooster.
I don't
know.
I
don't think Scott. I don't. No. People, yeah. No,
there's a lot of people saying no on my behalf. So
yeah,
I know.
Gonna have to run with that, I guess. Do you want to add anything to that, Gabrielle?
No, I mean, I think like, yeah, the affirmations are amazing. I'd love to give this some more thought because there's like Alexine and I doing so many things, and we've chatted about like how can we get members of the community more involved, and in the sense of I don't know if I want to call it like volunteers or whatever else, but we want to run programs and things like that. what would that look like? That being said, it's still like incubating. So Carla, I would love to hear from your end, and for anyone else, like if there's things that you really want to do or that you wish you could see from Women in Sales Club or whatever else it is. I'd love to hear the ideas that you might have, and then we can go from there. Cause yeah, that's kind of my thought on that one.
Okay, I think my thought process behind the question is that you guys show up week after week after week, and we don't always make it. You know, people come in and come out, and I think we all take from it. We fill up our cup, but it's, you know, wanting to give back. So I'll think of some ideas. It's been an amazing community for me, and I know for others, and I see a lot of faces on here that I've connected from that community. So
yeah.
Okay.
Also, I want to give, sorry, Carla, I want to give Carla a shout out in this room here as well, because Carla you sent me like tattoo, like stick on tattoos, and wrote me a really nice note and things like that. I actually I literally have a folder, like it's a binder, it's my development binder. And so I stuck your note in the folder as a really nice reminder. So similar to like the affirmation folder, but it's like, okay, this is awesome that, because real quick, like we do show up, we care. And I think it's awesome to see folks like you, and I see like Vicky in here, right? That you're showing up week after week, you're reaching out in between meetings as well, like cheering, encouraging, in the same way of like, I mean, you both have been like, yeah, you seem kind of down. I'm like, no, I didn't. It's like, yeah, you did. So it's nice to have people kind of like raise up a mirror and be like, no, like I care about you, I hear you, I see you, I acknowledge you, and I can tell when something's different. So it's been, I think just like your presence has been phenomenal in that way. And so you showing up to me is what fills my cup.
Yeah. And we're not keeping score. Like that's like a big thing too. I think like sometimes people will message me behind the scenes and they're like, I'm so sorry. Like I couldn't make it on Saturday. I hope you're not mad. I'm like, nobody's mad. We're good. We're not keeping score. I'm not watching when people like come in and leave. Like, I'm just grateful for the time that people spend with us when they spend it with us. And if they have to leave to go do whatever, it's a Saturday. I get it. Like there's cool shit going on. I mean, just because I don't have a life doesn't mean other people don't. So, so all of that. Yes. And yeah, thank you. I also appreciated the letter. So it's just those little things, those little moments where it feels good. That's what keeps us going. But there's also like, Scott, do you want to hear, I guess, or if anybody's curious, like there's also definitely like the hard parts and like some of that too. Like, do you want us to talk through some of that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So
go ahead. I can speak from experience to the point of like showing up every single week over and over and over and giving and giving and giving of yourself till there's potentially nothing left of you to give, and then still trying to find a way to give and then not feeling that reciprocated. And so it is nice to get, these affirmations or whatever you want to call it. So go ahead, Alexine.
No, that's a good, it's a good point. Yeah. And it's similar. That's why like, it's really nice to have you, Scott, and Amy as mentors, because I'm kind of learning, like you two are a conduit that I get to learn through. And then I think it's like one of the cool things is like for you guys, like the pride in knowing that a lot of the coaching and leadership and mentorship will then like kind of feed down, and like other groups like this will hopefully like continue to grow and develop. Like the goal isn't like, hey, Gabrielle and I are going to get the last Women in Sales group and there will never be another one. This is it. Like for all of Women in Sales, the like Women in Sales Club is in. Like that's not a goal. Like that sucks. Like that would suck if that was the end for everything. So I think like I'm proud of the work we're doing. I'm happy about it, but I'm also, I'm learning a lot. So, but yeah, I think like one of the really interesting experiences, and Gabrielle has actually been the one that's like coached me a lot on this, is I have had to learn how to have tough conversations, like conversations that I didn't want to have or didn't have to have before because it wasn't my community. Like in other instances, like I remember vividly, like 2 years ago in an unnamed, very large sales community, the Slack, I would see like a message and was not TNS, by the way. But I would see like a message and it'd be like something would cause like chaos. And then everybody was like pissed off behind the scenes. And I would just think to myself, I'm so happy I don't have to be the one to deal with like whatever that issue or deal with that comment and have to talk to that person. But now like that barrier doesn't exist. So I think like we have definitely had situations where people have made like kind of troll comments or have misinterpreted certain things and then created kind of like an issue over it. So we've had to have those conversations behind the scenes. And I think Gabrielle has sort of forced me into the discomfort of having those. Like, I think for her, it's not as hard for her to have those conversations as it is for me, because again, I'm so focused on wanting to create relationships and all the good stuff. So for me, it is like physically painful to have like awkward like those kind of tough conversations. So Gabrielle has done like a lot of coaching where I'll be like, here's what I'm feeling. And she's like, okay, tell me how you want to respond and let's talk through it. And let's figure it out before you reach out to the person, and then make it a group message. And that way, if this person goes like fully off the rails, like I'll go in there and just, do my thing. So I think that's she'll just shut it down. For me, like I have to overthink that message like 30 times. I have to like replay it. I retype it a bunch of times. I freak out internally. And most of the time it's been a really simple conversation. It's just like, hey, we saw you showing up as XYZ. We heard XYZ comment. We'd appreciate, can we talk about this a little bit further? What did you mean when you said this? Have you considered this other viewpoint? And some people were like really receptive and cool. They were like, you know what, I hadn't, and I'm glad that, whatever. And then some people were like, you're wrong, my civil liberties, back off. And then like deleted me on Facebook or whatever, on LinkedIn. And that's okay too, but it was a good learning. So there's that stuff that's the more challenging side.
Oh gosh. That was just a goofy conversation in a LinkedIn message the whole time. Yeah.
All right, let's go to Kelsey, who has a great question.
Hello, you two.
Hello.
So, hi. Doing great, by the way, Alexine and GB. Happy you're here. Okay, so what's one topic you've discussed in the last several months that you vehemently have disagreed on? This can be in business or things that you've talked about on one of your weekend sessions.
One we bat each other on is anything about like full cycle and SDR. That's like it's similar to like Scott, you and Amy, whenever that topic comes up on TNS and we have a lot of SDRs and BDRs there. Like that's one we kind of will bat.
Well, Amy and I are on the same page of that. So now I want to know, actually, I already know the answer, but.
Yeah,
Listen, I already know. Yeah, no. Yeah. Listen, I already know. I know where I'm at and who I'm with, right? Yeah, I agree. That's the only one. But I guess I don't know that we ever get into a place where we're like vehemently opposed, like you're wrong, like what the fuck is wrong with you? Nothing like that. It's more like that's a perspective. I think that's like the one topic where I feel like we get to that point. But beyond that, I feel like more often than not, Alexine, like if we do have different perspectives, like there are times where like I'm at her condo and we're sitting across from the table from each other and she says something and I'm just like looking there and I'm like, no, I know, right? Or it could be vice versa, right? And while either one of us is talking and we have a different perspective from each other, we're typically like nodding our heads along and being like, wow, I never thought about it in that way. So it's never like you're right, I'm wrong, and we have to live in that world of polarity in that sense. But it's more like, oh, okay, like that's just a perspective I had never considered before, and now I have some noodling to do on that thought.
What about as far as business perspectives go, or moving forward with ideas and where you want to go next?
Boy, we have no shortage of ideas. It's the execution. I think the execution for anyone is the hardest part. Like we can all come up with a million ideas and you have to, like, it's making the time, it's holding the space to plan, it's creating like the schedule, it's sticking to it. Like it's all so much easier said than done. And I've been involved in like boards and community groups going back like 6-7 years. And this has always been the Achilles heel. Like I think back, I was early days with like enterprise sales for it. Like this is always the Achilles heel of like groups is the execution phase. So I think for me, I'm a big fan of like really getting like a firm outline of like, again, it's like a checklist. Like I want it to be so dumbed down that I know exactly like what we need to be doing. So like, we're still in that process. Like we're planning to do just like an offsite together a little President's Club trip for the two of us, and just like plan a bunch of stuff and like get a calendar worked out, figure out exactly what we need to be doing. How are we going to execute on stuff? But the future looks exciting. I think.
I always find it so interesting to see how people go about running their business. And I would call Women in Sales Club a business, because that stuff that you just talked about, I don't do that for my own business. I don't do that for surf and sales. I don't do that for Thursday night sales. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just fascinating to me to see the delta between operational styles. And you were talking before about how you two don't think the same and operate the same, but it sounds like you do think the same when it comes to that stuff. I wonder how important that is. Like Amy and I clash, for example, because she wants to plan everything, and I'm like, I don't want to plan shit. It's all going to be fine. And that is like, not necessarily the best partnership there. But how do you consciously enter the business arrangement with somebody because you're like, okay, we're aligned on all these things? And would it be way harder if you weren't?
I wonder, because I think there's a lot of stuff we're like, I was thinking about even coming in today where I was like, all right, like Alexcine's like, we need to kick off this newsletter. And I'm like, I need to get my shit together so I can kick off this newsletter, right? Like otherwise Alexine is going to roll over me like a bull in a china shop. Like that's like, those are the things that I think about. I'm like, that's kind of like, that's part of it of, I think that's one thing where we have to come together and be able to have a conversation and kind of talking about this. Like, let's do an offsite. Let's really talk about like, what do we want to do with Women in Sales Club? What is our six month to 1 year look like? I think that's one part of it. Another part that I was thinking about is, I do think about appreciating our strengths. So, Alexine's strengths, from what I observe, and it's not limited to just what I observe, is there is that process orientation. There is that like, let's get things done. There is that, let's remove the ambiguity, and she's just going to go after it. And there are times where like, she might have a question about something and be trying to decide like, what's the next best step. And I can just share, I'm like, what are we trying to do here? Like, what's the vision, right? Like, what are we aspiring to do? What's our Northern Star? And so we can come together in those ways and just, and that could be from, do we want to bring on an advisor like Lori Richardson? And then what do we call her? And so it's like, and then what do we need to do next? Or if it's hey, like, there is someone who reached out to us about a sponsorship. And while it's great to have money, I might come in and say, ethically, do we want to accept this money? Right. And so, I don't know. I think there's like a nice balance, and granted, there's always ways that I can be better, but I think there is a nice balance of having that process orientation and like, here are the things that we need to do. But I'm not saying that Alexine doesn't have and doesn't possess this, but I think there can be times where I'm like, all right, like what high level, what are we trying to do? Right. And let's make sure that we're just marching in that direction versus trying to do anything and everything.
Kelsey has another question.
I'm just, full of them tonight.
Keep them coming.
No, I'm very curious because obviously having attended quite a few of them, with the thing with Clubhouse that I find intriguing is like how you keep it structured enough, but also loose at the same time. Like, are you walking in with some kind of, at least like Alexine, do you have an outline of a conversation? Do you have things you want to make sure you hit on so you're not forgetting? Like, what are you walking into these conversations wanting to walk out with, I guess? What are they looking like?
Oh, I wish we did have an outline. No, and I think, I don't know if that's like a good, this is where things get like blurry for me, because I'm like, on one side, I feel like because of the fact that we don't have it like perfectly planned out every single time, it becomes a very organic conversation. And it's very much like, it feels like I'm sitting around a table with people that I know a little bit or fairly well, and we're just talking. So I think like that for us works. I think because of the fact also that it's on Clubhouse, it's an audio only app. I can like, I don't have to watch my facial expression. So I can like hear a question, be muted and be like, what in the, like whatever. And like take a minute and think about it. Someone else might be talking. I think once we delve into other forums and other event styles, we're going to have different kind of like levels of preparation for those. So like I see us when we go into when we host that event that's going to be about motherhood, that is going to be like a structured, like we are going to get together and figure out a question list. We're going to figure out who the right people that should be part of that conversation are. And so that's going to be a very different motion. So I think like by virtue of Clubhouse, although everybody hates Clubhouse, I guess, it works really well for us to do just an organic flow, but I don't know that that translates to other forums.
We are talking a lot in the background. Like we're texting each other quite a bit, or if I'm at her place, like we are chatting through like where do we want it to go. So it's not totally and completely unorchestrated, but we'll provide guardrails like as needed. Like, right, is the conversation going way too left? Did someone say something really freaking crazy? Like we have to talk about it. Do we need to move people around? Someone's raising their hand and we're concerned that they're going to be more disruptive than anything else. So there's a bit of puppeteering happening in the background.
Yeah. Well, Gabrielle did a good job. We did have early on, we had a situation where someone kind of like came in and was very much, I don't know what to call it, like educating the group and like talking at people. It happened twice. We kind of like, we fired what I'd call like a warning shot where we were like, hey, we talked about this, like we noticed this today. And then it happened a second session. So like Gabrielle did a really good job of even like facilitating the communication behind the scenes on that. It was like, hey, want to do a quick reminder here of like what the purpose of this group is. Like, we're not here to like talk at people. Like this is supposed to be an environment where we are learning amongst one another. So this is like not really the energy we're trying to bring to this conversation. And again, like she did an incredible job because that person was very receptive to the feedback. Like they were like, all right, thank you for making me aware. And some other people had pinged us behind the scenes saying similar things. So like it was again, you get back to like, those are the conversations that are super uncomfortable, but are very big learning lessons too. So it is very fascinating experience.
Fascinating experience. I find it interesting too, because for me, like one of the hardest parts with Clubhouse is listening comprehension. I don't know if I'm like alone in that, but I always have to write everything down.
Yeah, I'm a terrible auditory learner. I can't do audiobooks. It doesn't happen. You put me in the classroom in college, straight to sleep in the back of the classroom.
I cannot do audiobooks, but Alexine will call me out from time to time and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing right now. I need to write these things down.
Yeah.
But you're always somewhere fabulous, and that's cool, and that adds to the conversation. She's like, I'm ice skating with an ice cream cone. I'm like, what? What? Every time
it was an ice cream cone. I was eating ice cream in the park. Okay, you guys catch me at crazy times.
Exact example here. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's been an interesting experience. But yeah, sometimes Gabrielle does get to play back up.
Yeah.
I got a question from Brian Barron now. You're up, Brian.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hi.
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Alexine, congrats on a big couple weeks for you.
It's been a lot. I don't even have my ring on. What am I doing?
I think you need to check your man's LinkedIn page and get his game stepped up just a little bit though.
I know. I was like, I didn't want to tag. I know. He's like, should I change my picture? I'm like, it's your first picture from college. Yes. Yeah. I hope
Don't come for Nick. Don't come for Nick. He's got an aesthetic.
He did babysit Gabrielle's dog for an entire day for us. And that was a beautiful gesture.
Mm-hmm.
So when you guys were talking about some of the people that you're having issues with, it got me thinking about, as you're growing a community, how do you balance that quality versus quantity of, you want to attract the most people and you want to, reach the most people, but you also want to keep the quality high so that you can bring the most value. So how do you balance that?
Mm-hmm. That is a good question. This is a good question for Scott too.
No, he doesn't want to hear from me though. He asked you.
I think no, I want to ask you after because I'm curious your answer. I think it's a very delicate balance because I think on one side, there's growth at all costs. And this is like every community makes this decision, like, or has to kind of like make this decision. It's like, do we want to grow at any cost? And it gets back to Gabrielle's example a little bit ago about companies who have approached us with money. Do we want to grow at any cost, or potentially like give this off to someone else, let them just like absorb it and it disappears? Or do we want to build what we want to build and do and include the people that we want to include and like be very mindful? And we're, I think, more so in this camp, I hope. I hope Gabrielle agrees with that. But it is a really interesting experience because, you know, the early example that she gave, someone had approached us about an opportunity. They would like share our brand out everywhere. They would like give us a bunch of money. They do whatever. Problem, the company is notorious for being an incredibly misogynistic environment, borderline abusive towards women in the workplace and folks of color. Like there's like a whole lineage of stuff that is back there. And so that for us was not a hard conversation. We like texted and we're like, are we taking dirty money or are we not taking dirty money? Are we going to grow with dirty money or are we going to grow with what we believe in and our value system? And that was like, we were both here, like lockstep over here. And it's not easy, like, especially like we're both around the same age at a certain point of our careers. And like, yeah, it's, you know, 15, 20, $30,000. It all sounds great. But at the end of the day, like, what are you potentially giving up in place of like that type of growth? Like what message does that send if we partner ourselves with a company that's incredibly misogynistic and potentially creating PTSD in all these women that have come into their workplace? Like, what does that say about us? So I think there is like that, it's the growth at all costs versus growth on a value-based system. But it's challenging, but I think we're pretty aligned over here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also like play out scenario. I think there's also probably an anxiety trail that Alexine and I both frequent in similar ways. I'm like, okay, let's say that we partner up with this organization or with this person, and we kind of have an idea, and then like everything gets exposed, and it's like Women in Sales Club, it's associated with this. I'm just like, I just don't want to be in that situation. I don't want to have those conversations. I'd rather not. I was like, I'd rather that we not put ourselves in those situations either. So there is like a thinking more so for the long term in that way. Like, what is it going to take for us to be able to have that long term in general? And it does help that we do. It seems like we have like similar and shared values in that way and similar priorities. I think there are some challenging moments where Alexine had referred to someone who is like, this person like hijacked a post of hers, and it seemed to like, you know, she's just saying certain things that just didn't seem really productive, and you know, reach out to the person, and then you know, after we reach out, this person like, you know, decides to block or disconnect with Alexine, and that's that. So I think there are times where we have to have these conversations of like, as we're going to be growing, as we hold true to the values that we aspire to uphold, like there are going to come those times where push comes to shove, we're going to have to like part ways with certain folks, and like that might just be part of the journey. And so how can we help each other move through those moments, and just again like stay true and uphold the things that we find to be really important and valuable to ourselves. This is why I say, like, Scott, I don't think you're woo, because you are like the quickest person to be like, that's a fuck no from me. So.
Yeah. I just messaged Alexine behind the scenes guessing the company, and I got it right for what it's worth. And yeah, it's not the amount of time it takes me to process that decision is like super quick and fast. You know, so I'll never like take dirty money from somebody who's just like so the opposite of everything that I stand for and everything that the group stands for. You know, the only possible caveat or exception would be if they were truly, genuinely coming to the table saying, we have erred, and we have erred massively, and we don't know how to fix it ourselves, and can you all help us solve it? And you know, I don't know if you both would agree with that, but if this place was coming to you in that spirit, like maybe there's something there that you could try to do to help and heal and help everything move forward. That would be the only way to like get me to get involved. And so maybe that's the same, for the two of you.
We talked about
Yeah.
that was the exact conversation we had where we were like, if there was a world where this company was talking to us for the sheer fact that they wanted to rectify their actions, acknowledge publicly like some of the missteps that they've taken and take a step in the right direction, way different conversation. But the conversation was, can we slap your name on our logo? And then can we market that out so we can get more women on the team to put them in a toxic environment? No, no, big no.
You're like, oh yeah, GB told me to go to this place where I had to open up a harassment case. I don't need that in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Good question, Brian. We've got a question from Jessica.
Hey, Alexine. Hey, GB. How are ya?
Hey,
So I had a question, and you know what? I hesitated even to type it in the box because, sometimes, and maybe this is a woman thing and a topic thing, but because it's around money. And I guess I wanted to know, is the ultimate goal to monetize this, or is it supposed to run like an association?
Yeah.
And like, no judgment either way. Like,
Love this
like,
question.
it should make money, if that's what you want it. But I think sometimes people assume like you should be doing this out of the goodness of your heart. And so I wanted to know, and this is new to me, so I didn't know how this worked.
There is no shame in this question. Yes, we are in the process that we have begun monetizing. This is a formal company. We have an LLC created. So, and there's no shame in that. And yeah, there's GB's answer for you. Just in full disclosure, just in general on the topic of women and money, this has been such a taboo, which is ironic because I've talked to you, Scott, and you have like a text thread where you're just like, messaging your friends and you guys are like giving each other shit about money. It is so taboo amongst women. Like we're not allowed to talk about money. When I was negotiating my offer, Gabrielle, I'm like telling her exact numbers. I'm like, this is the exact amount my OT is going up. This is this. Here's this bonus I'm negotiating. Like zero shame, zero like judgment. If she ever had a similar conversation with me, the only thing I'd be doing is be like, hey, GB, are you going to ask for an extra 10K? Are you going to ask for, like, there's no animosity there, but that is really one of the first women relationships I've had where we can talk about money openly, which is horrible. I've been in sales over 8 years, and it's I remember years ago having a woman that was my manager at the time, and she's like, I see your commission checks and they make me sick because your checks are higher than mine. And I was like, what the hell? You make more money if I make more. I'm like 23 at the time. And I was like, what is this? What is this environment that I have walked into? But that's like what a lot of our early exposure was like, hey, hush, hush. We don't talk about money. But I feel like that's a part that I'm not afraid for us to own either. Like we are going to have partnerships, sponsorships, whatever you want to call them. And as we should, like, I think there's no shame in that. And I think that other groups are doing the same thing, and we can, call it whatever we want, but it doesn't take away from the fact. If anything, again, it's like, it's additive to the work that we're trying to do. The more money that we bring in, the more we can think of like, could we do a road show? Could we go to other cities and host an event? Could we do a dinner somewhere? Like it adds to our resources that we don't necessarily have available today. So I think it's fantastic. I'm proud of the fact that this is a side hustle, like a true side hustle for us. And I'm proud of the fact that Gabrielle and I can have real conversations about money, because it's a shame that I haven't been able to have those for so many years with anyone in my circle.
For sure. Gabrielle, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah.
Besides your
I hope-
picture of dollars?
Yeah, I don't. LOL. I don't think this is too bad to share, but I know there was a few months ago, Lori Richardson put on a session, and she had a lot of the organizations that are like women in fill in the blank or sisters in sales, those kind of organizations. And one of the things that got shared was that like no one's making money in these organizations. So it's like, why not? So I think Alex.
Wait, can you elaborate on that? What do you mean no one's making money?
No, I don't think we can elaborate. I don't think no one is, but some groups, well, I don't know what was like.
Are you talking about those communities aren't earning money?
It was a
Or are you
large-
talking about the individuals inside of those communities aren't earning?
It was more so around the communities themselves, but
I
it was
see.
like a broader, but
Yeah.
it doesn't say, it's not to say that each one of those is not earning. It was just like to the volume that other groups are potentially monetizing that may not be just women led.
Got
I
it.
think it's sorry, GB, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, we're fine. We're fine. I just think that, like, no, because I didn't go to the session, so I didn't know all the details. I was like, oops, my bad. But I think like Alexine and I, we had a conversation and figuring out the details of like how to change that, like how to make it, it's almost, this kind of grand experiment of how can we create community, how can we create content, how can we deliver a phenomenal experience, those kind of things, and also run a successful, like, and have it be a successful business too. So that's the thing.
Well, awesome. Thank you to both of you. Thanks for answering the question. And I do think it should be a topic for next conversation.
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
the
I
women's
agree.
world.
More money conversations. Yeah, it's one of those
Yes.
for all of us, even like when we're job seeking, like Amy, I was sharing like straight numbers with her when I was going through the interview process. I'm like, here's a base, here's variable, here's the other stuff I want to negotiate. Scott knew my exact numbers. Like there was no mystery. But again, those are people like in my circle that I was comfortable talking about this with.
Okay, but can I push you on this?
Yeah, please.
Because don't you have the opportunity to expand that particular circle at,
Yeah.
with some of the people here, with some of the people in the Women in Sales Club, and don't you have the opportunity to create that space? There's no reason why I should have a text thread with a handful to a dozen different people where we're like pushing each other financially and sharing certain things. There's no reason you can't replicate that same kind of environment and expand your circle by one at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
KD and I talk about all the time, just like add one, talk to two and go, add one, talk to two and go. Don't you have the opportunity to do the same thing?
I mean, I think, yes, I think the answer is yes. Yes. I think there's a fear. I think there's a fear, not just
There is for sure. I mean, it's very similar. It's very similar to me to like how many times I'm having conversation with the female friends in my life where I'm like, ask for this raise, apply for this job. Yes, you deserve that job. All of these dudes I know are applying for that who are totally fucking unqualified and you're worried about. It's very similar to all that. So you have the fear there, but like create the safe space without me, without other people. It's like you, GB, Jessica, Cynthia, Kelsey, Carl, Amy, can't you all craft that space where it's a small circle, but then you slowly expand it as you're building out this large network that you're doing?
Yeah, I think those have been some of the conversations that it hasn't been specific to this, but I can't give too many details because there's movements happening in the background, but like there's an opportunity for both of us because we've been chatting about like negotiating and what to ask for and how to push and all those other things. And so there have been really successful outcomes from those conversations as well. So like these are recent text threads of, all right, how do we bring these conversations to like outside of just our text thread one-on-one? So like how do we shape that conversation exactly?
Yes.
Well, I don't want to speak out of turn, but you just start. You just have the conversation. You just know that there's going to be missteps, but you know that in this particular circle, it's safe. And if somebody goes too far, somebody else is going to get them back in line, and you're going to hug it out afterwards. And there's no like real danger that's going to happen. There's no repercussions. So this is, again, to me, this part of this. So many women that I talk to overthink some of this stuff, and you're held back by the fear and the what if and all this. And whereas a lot of men, even men who have no business being in the room, just say fuck it and go for it and just enter into these dialogues. So it's, as a friend of both of you and so many other women who are not even here, it pains me. It literally like hurts my heart to listen to you struggle to have these dialogues about money. Like if Jessica's asking about money, and if she was like, I want to be on a text thread where there's like 10 of us stack ranking our earnings every month, and there's nobody kind of synthesizing and leading those conversations, like that pains me. And I don't know how to be any more helpful than I try to be. And I just think that there's opportunity there for somebody to take charge and just go for it. There's no real risk. What are we worried about? Cynthia's worried about angst. There's fucking angst anyways in every org that you work at. You're worried about pettiness? What sales org exists without pettiness already anyways? Give me a break. What are we worrying about?
Yeah. No,
Anyway.
it's a good call out. And it is something we have a money idea in the works. So that would be like a good jumping off point, because it was a text thread that we had like circa the last 3 days. So there are ideas there. I also think like we did a session on negotiating, but it was quite a ways back. So like, I'm not opposed to also doing another session and like reworking the topic a little bit, but having it be about money, or like women and money. And it's just, that's the topic. And
I think that might be a very well attended session.
I agree.
To be honest with you, I've never seen that title in any kind of event before. Ever. Anybody raise their hand if they've seen that? I've certainly seen them led by men before and attended by men.
Topic list goes on the topic list. Page 9, it's starting. No, this is great. And I think this is a good place for us to like get ideas, to get things that need to be talked about. So no, I think this could be a really cool conversation to start, and I'm here for it. And I'm glad that Gabrielle and I at least started it with one another, because it's paid literal dividends. So, and that's the other reason, that response around, I think for some people, like talking about the monetization of a community, or like Scott, you think about like your Patreon, for example, it's like, so
Sure.
like in the scheme of things, it's, for me, we're putting something out there, and we're doing this stuff, and companies are wanting a piece of it. They want to attach their name to it. Like it would be like, we would be remiss not to take money for that. Why would we be kind of like, it's like, it would just be us kind of like paying lip service to a bunch of people, and not focusing on the growth and the objectives that we have. So in order for us to like do the things that we want to do to better the space, to make more opportunities for women, to help pave the way, we also need resources. So it's like, you want to meet us where we are, you care about the mission, then you be the connecting piece.
So maybe something that'd be interesting to touch upon here would be the way that you frame and craft your messaging to sponsors to collect money, in the value of what you provide and the benefit to sponsoring organizations. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but like, when has anybody heard that conversation or that dialogue happen before? And I think maybe that would be an interesting topic to touch upon if you two are open to it.
I looked at GB. I'm like, I'm down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna be like, Scott, you got to be there, but
Or do you want us to touch on it now?
Yeah, now, like
I thought you were still talking about the future
Like,
event.
I'm talking about it now. Like, share how you craft the message that's about like what you do, where the value is, where the benefit is to organizations, why they should be a part of it, and essentially like why they should pay you money. Like, I think that's an interesting conversation to be had, and consider this a trial run before you do it in front of 500 other people.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the answer here, in full disclosure, is that a lot of the companies that we've talked to have actually approached us. They've come to us, like, we're seeing your content everywhere. We're seeing people tag you and stuff. We're seeing this and that. We want part of it. And we're not over promising. Like, we're not coming to them like, here's some in-depth analytics on like what you're going to get. I think like the interesting piece is we're leading a lot with the message. So I'm pulling up our I can read you if you want me to read to you, if that interests you, our mission statement here. Would that be helpful?
It depends if you feel like it's important to the message and the pitch that you deliver. I mean, to me, like the first takeaway, and you haven't got into much of the messaging yet, but the first takeaway is like, do something to the point where you're not outbounding. And I've talked about this all the time. Like, you have created something and built something and not worried about revenue. And you have so much chatter that you're pulling people in rather than having to push messaging out. And that is like an enormous milestone in and of itself, right? Having inbound sales conversations are far easier than outbound sales conversations. So, but now once you've pulled them in, like, how are you saying, hey, you should pay me $5,000 a month, $20,000 a month, $50,000 a month? How do you articulate that? Because I know there's other people here who are thinking about or trying to build community, and they understand it's a pretty good side hustle. It's a good way to give back, but it's also a good way to make some scratch on the side. So help them out.
I think
So-
oh yeah,
Go ahead, Alexine. You can look on our LinkedIn page, right? I think the big thing that I see based on the conversations I've been having is like a lot of companies are trying to attract a lot of women to their organizations. Like, you look at a Gong, for example, where there's a Rooney Rule in place, like we completely rebranded our website so that, like, for the purpose of how do we start to attract more diverse talent. So like, you have a lot of women who are, or folks who identify as women, who are wanting to enter into the workplace. I think there might be, even to an extent, a little bit of anxiety, probably based on workplace trauma or just trauma in general, and they want to be very, very intentional about the organizations, the cultures they want to go into. And so what I see is organizations really want to partner with the kinds of communities that will give them access to the kinds of talent they want to attract in. So like, that to me is really like the benefit of like how do we get sponsors? Like, there's of course the attraction of how do we get people to join our group? How do we get more women into our group? Like, how do we come off as not just only for women, but very inclusive at the same time too? And how do we differentiate in those ways? But I think at the end of the day is a lot of organizations are recognizing, if I don't have a diverse team, and diverse team doesn't only mean my frontline folks, like I have diverse representation. It's how, like, I need to make sure I have lady leaders or Black leaders or fill in the blank leaders. And without that, I'm going to lose out on the best talent, on the top talent that wants to be a part of those organizations. So like, that to me is really what I see a lot of organizations moving towards. It's what I see a lot of literature like written about in Harvard Business Review and all those other things. So a lot of organizations are pouring into those kind of communities that are attracting a diverse workforce, especially on the leadership level, so that they can actually have a fighting chance of being relevant and resonating with like a growing majority in our workspaces. So that's my TED talk on the matter. And so I like, my recommendation really would be like, where, like, it's almost like I think about like the diversity, equity, inclusion part, especially on the leadership level, and how much it's being written about. It's like, okay, well, how can I tap into the people that organizations are trying to get access to, and how can they do it in an organic way? And like, that to me is where the community can lie in, versus them trying to just like recruit inorganically.
Yeah.
And I think yes to everything Gabrielle said. I think there's also like more, I guess, on the tactical retention side. I think like a big piece of what we're doing, again, it's like organic. Like, we're thinking of an idea like, hey, we want to do XYZ event. We're finding like the people that we're going to partner with, the companies that we're going to partner with are people that are game to let us run with ideas that we have. So if we think of like, hey, we want to do an article like this, who from your team would participate? Or, hey, we want to run an event like this. Are you guys game? Like, they're saying yes. Like, they're like, yes, what do you need? We're like, cool, you do the Zoom shit. We don't know what to do. Like, that's the kind of partners that I think we're gonna work well with. And I think that is a piece that's going to keep because of the fact that we're constantly communicating with them, there's like not a lot of lag in communication that's happening. So I think on the retention side, for us, my goal would be for us to continue maintaining not just one, it's similar to a business deal. Like, I don't want to be single threaded through one point of contact. I want for any of these partners that we're going to work through to have like a few points of contact to have some kind of like constant communication that's taking place, for us to be able to have ideas, iterate off of them, work together on certain things, and then for us to divide and conquer on other things. So I think like for me, I'm approaching this as we are basically like CSMs once these people sign on board. Like we went from co-founder, we signed the deal, now we're CSMs, we're trying to retain and upsell now. That's like we're landing, now we're expanding. And so I think that's a big piece too.
Any other questions for Alexine or Gabrielle before we kind of wrap up from anybody?
Got another one if nobody
Go
else
ahead,
wants to
Brian.
chime in.
Yeah, go for it.
So kind of on the flip side of a lot of this conversation is, what are you talking to your employers about when it comes to your side hustle? Are you informed? They obviously know it's happening. I mean, Alice is, got plenty of people involved in LinkedIn, and so does Gong as well. So everybody's well connected. I'm sure they're well aware of what you're doing and what's happening. Like, what kind of conversations are you having with them about your hustle and how you're working towards that?
I'm just laughing.
Sorry.
The comments. Okay, well, unfortunately, like that would have been my answer, but it's an LLC now, so we can't say mind your business, because now it is a literal business. So like we do on some level, like, so I brought it up at the very beginning of my interviews. Like before I even entered into the formal interview process with Alice, I was like, hey, I want to make it abundantly clear. Like, I have this is my side hustle. It will not interfere with work hours, and it will add to the exposure that our brand is going to get via this group. Are you guys cool with that?
About why you decided to disclose that straight away?
I mean, I guess I don't know if you like, the honest answer is I don't know if you technically have to. I did talk to an employment attorney.
I have to. I just think it would be helpful for people to understand like why you decided to disclose it.
Oh, for me personally,
Yeah.
I talked to an employment attorney, in full disclosure. Like, I didn't know if you have to talk about it. I didn't know if you did have to talk about it. He was really annoying and didn't really answer like any of my questions. And I have so much anxiety that I couldn't like cope. So I just brought it up because I was like, I can't sleep. I'm not going to be able to sleep at night if I have this weird secret. So that's me, anxiously minded. But for me, I didn't want to have it on my mind. And I also didn't want there to be, again, I'm like all about clearing ambiguity in sales and in life. So like for me, I'm like, I want this company to know from day one, like, this is my thing. I care deeply about this, but I care deeply about my role, my day to day. But these are two worlds that are going to live next to one another, and neither is going to interfere with the other one. But at the same time, I want to make you aware, because what I don't want to have, what would be worse for me personally is we get 3 months into the role and I didn't tell anyone that I have this women in sales club, and they're like, hey, I'm seeing all this. I'm not, this wouldn't be Alice anyways, but like another company say, and they're like, oh, well, I'm seeing all this shit on LinkedIn. Like, what is this? Like, what's this group? Are you doing any of this during workout? Or like, I didn't want any of that. I wanted zero ambiguity. So for me, I chose to disclose it. Again, I talked to that employment attorney. It was very confusing what he said, and everything was like a half answer and very political. It was like very much a politician. So I didn't really understand if you do or don't have to disclose, but it sounded like if things ever got to a bad point with any company, there are repercussions that could potentially happen. So it's better to just tell people from the jump, is what I got. I could be wrong though, but it was also a confusing call. So
yeah, like at Gong, from my end, well, there's a few things that had happened in the year where beginning of the year, there was another Gongster who was moonlighting. He was like doing 3 other SDR manager jobs, like a total psycho.
That's different.
It is different. It's in many ways. And so like that was a breach of the employment contract. And he had also not shared that was going on either. Now, like there are other people at the organization. So like with that guy, he got let go immediately, right? So like I started off the year seeing that happen. So like I go back, I review my employment offer. And so one of the things that I did see in there was like, all right, there is like you cannot moonlight, right? And so then it's like, all right, well, what is moonlighting? How do we constitute that? And it did say like, you need to share like what we need to know, like what you're doing outside of work. And as long as like HR knows and you have the approval for everything, like there's going to be no problem. So for mine, it was like I went to our HR business partner. I like had a conversation with her about like, hey, I'm doing this on the side. I just want to make sure that it's not going to be a problem moving forward, that I'm not like doing anything that could breach my employment contract. And she's like, it should be fine. I just have to loop in the senior director. And really the biggest thing that I saw, like the department that I'm in, that they cared about was that this did not interfere with work at all. So like didn't interfere with work hours, nothing like that. And so like that was even in writing. The senior director responds back and says, since this is not going to interfere with work, that's perfectly fine with me. And so that's now on my employee file with our HR team. So that's like the much more like legal process of things. But I would imagine there's definitely companies out there that are, hey, we want to get women into leadership positions, and they see this as amazing. They celebrate it. It's not just some like HR legal process or whatever else it is, but it's like, this is exactly what we'd want at our organization. And how can we help you?
Yeah.
Right. So like that, I think that's like, so it's, I would imagine a lot of it might be based on the culture of the organization and what is their attitude and experience with people having side hustles.
That was do you remember that 2 weeks though, Gabrielle? Like we were texting back and forth. It was like the 2 weeks that we formalized an LLC. It was very anxiety inducing, just in full disclosure, like more so for me. But I was just like nervous. We didn't know how. I was working at my old company at the time. So it was before I took this offer. So I actually had to sit down with my CEO, who was in Australia, who I talked to like 5 times one-on-one. And I didn't need to do that. But for me, it felt like the right thing to do. And I had he liked how I performed in sales. So I felt like it would be a fine conversation. And he was super chill. He was like in the park on his iPhone. And he's like, I hope everybody has a side hustle. Go make some more money. Bye. Have a nice day. And I was like, all right, cool. We're done. And it was a 2-minute conversation, but it took me like a week and a half of the employment attorney and doing all this research to have a 2-minute phone call. So that's another reason. Like I would just rather not even have the anxiety and just have the conversation and get the elephant out of the room so I can get it off my mind. But I don't know if you have to do that. I guess, Scott, back to you. I don't know if
you definitely don't have to do that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that. I think it's a personal choice in terms of your risk profile and like how candid that you want to be. You definitely don't have to do it though. It's just interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me like how people go about these things and how people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think about this stuff at all or worry about it at all. And you know that, Alexine, like we were having text messages and I'm like, you're going to pay a fucking lawyer to tell you what? What are you talking about? That's just mind blowing to me. Right. But at the same token, like before I took the gig at Qualia, I was like, because they had a clause in there that said like, Vicky, like you can't do anything else. And I'm like, I ain't signing that shit. No way, no how. I do this on the side. I do this other thing on the side and you don't own me. What I do on my own time is my own. And that was a sticking point. And then they removed that kind of language. So, but I wouldn't have brought it up. And I didn't bring it up until I saw it in the offer letter. So.
Yeah, I was just looking at my offer letter. So there is it's a part of the.
Yeah, duty of loyalty is not actually legally enforceable. 1,000%. I've been down this road like many, many times. I'm an old man who's done this many, many times before. Not legally enforceable. Also, that's Israeli language, by the way. And those laws are different than laws in the USA. So I'm just saying there's ways around everything and everything is negotiable with this stuff. And nobody, male, female, manager, VP, AE, whatever, should be railroaded into signing an agreement that says you can't do XYZ on your own time. Fuck you, get off my lawn. I can do whatever I want on my own time. That's the answer if you push back and you have the clout and, pedigree, if you will, to command that kind of respect. If you don't, then they're going to tell you no, tough luck. And if you need that job, then you're going to end up signing your life away for no good reason. That's what I've learned along the way.
Yeah. Jose asked a question or made the comment about like, isn't this better that you're leading communities? Like, isn't it positive? And like back to Gabrielle's point, like the answer is yes. Like the right companies will see this as a bonus. Like this is like,
Sure.
can
And
you
they
imagine? It's like a 2-for-1 special. Like
Yes,
you're getting a sales
exactly
rep
right.
who hits quota, and you're going to
100%.
get the leader of a women in sales group that
Totally.
even if you don't sponsor it, you're going to have your name tied to it somehow automatically. Like,
Totally.
yes, hell yes. Like I'd be like,
If I was GB, I'd be like, I will be the best recruiter that exists in all of Gong. Because of all this other stuff that I do, like my numbers for recruiting will be through the roof. I will literally save you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. You don't touch what I do on my own time. And Gong would bow down to that messaging.
I love it. I just want to bottle it up sometimes and take a shot of it occasionally. But I do feel like I will say, and this, you know, partially credit to you, Scott, partially credit to Amy. I do feel like this turn of interviews, I had a very different like confidence level than I've ever had in the past. And I attribute a lot of that to Thursday Night Sales, to these communities, to Women in Sales Club, because I just felt like I really walked in and like owned my experience and like felt like I really felt good about it. And then this conversation about Women in Sales Club, for even though I was nervous about like bringing it up, rather than even waiting, I'm like, I'm going to bring it up before I even enter your interview funnel. And then there should be no question about this at any other point the entire time I work here. Like there should be absolutely no questions. There should be nothing that comes up. But I do feel like one of the positives of both our community, Thursday Night Sale, of all these communities in these conversations, has been the level up that I felt in confidence and the ability to really advocate for myself, especially during an interview process. Like it was a very different, I felt the clout. The clout was there.
Good.
A little Scott Leese on my shoulder.
Well,
screaming.
and you should, and everybody should operate that way when they're going about the interview process, as far as I'm concerned. You know,
Yeah.
So, all right, we're out of time. Want to thank Alexine and Gabrielle and everybody who is here. Check them out Saturday mornings, right? Women in Sales Club.
2 to 4 p.m. CST on Saturdays.
Oh, afternoons. My apologies. My apologies. 2 to 4 in the afternoon on Saturdays, and all over LinkedIn, and maybe some more events, live events, Zoom events coming soon. So thank you both. Thanks everybody for being here. We'll see you next time.
All right, thank you.